this video, I'm going to teach you a step-by-step process for lean gaining. That is to build as much muscle as possible while gaining as little fat, if any, as possible. The first thing we need to do is define the different terms people use when they're talking about lean gaining. So people will say gaintaining, they will say main gaining, both of which don't make any sense because you can't maintain and gain, because maintain would imply that you're not going anywhere. Gaining is growing. So you can't maintain and gain. But people often say gaintaining and main gaining. This would be similar to lean bulking or lean gaining, which are the primary terms I'll be using. And again, the goal with a lean gaining or lean bulking approach is really simple. We want to build as much muscle as possible, and we want to ideally not gain any body fat if possible. There has been a lot of advice given when somebody is trying to build muscle, and usually the advice is to eat as much as possible and train as hard as possible. This is a very ballistic and mindless approach, and although I do believe you need to eat more and you definitely need to train hard, you can't just aimlessly train and you can't just aimlessly eat. You will just get fat. And what we are trying to do with a lean gaining or lean bulking approach is the opposite of that. We want to gain with an intelligent method that allows us to stay lean, because what's the point of building a ton of muscle if you can't actually see it? In order to have a good approach for lean gaining, we first have to understand how much muscle can we build naturally. So when we step into the realm of steroids and performance enhancement drugs, this is where we take our hormones into a super physiological level. We're not going to discuss that today because that takes it out of the realm of what we can actually calculate and predict. But with the human body in its natural form, we can predict how much muscle we can build, because your body can only naturally build so much muscle per day, per week, per month, per year. You have a specific frame and you have a specific hormonal environment that will only allow so much muscle to be built, because your joints, your structure, your organs, everything is designed in a certain way. And we can't just lay muscle on top of muscle on top of muscle and expect to not have joint issues, organ issues, or any type of health parameters that go haywire and turn negative. This is often why super physiological athletes who are taking a lot of performance enhancement drugs do have health issues, because it's not just the muscle that is being built at a certain point, but the organs and the joints and the tendons and things also start growing. And this can be a problem. But again, this is for natural lifters who want to gain as much muscle as possible. So how much muscle can we gain? Like, what is possible from lifting and eating according to this lean gaining approach? Now, there are two recommended rates of gain that we're going to be looking at today. And these are really popular and I would say are based by evidence. So both research and evidence in the field of actually working with people. And the first one is 0.5 to 2 pounds of muscle per month. And that's going to be anywhere between 0.125 pounds and 0.5 pounds per week. The other one is going to be 0.25 and 0.5% of body mass per week. The interesting thing about these numbers is that if you're in a place where you actually should be gaining muscle, meaning you don't have a lot of fat to lose, you might not be shredded, and that's not what I'm getting at here. I'm getting at you're in a healthy position to actually start increasing your calories and trying to build muscle instead of needing to lose fat to get to that optimal physique or health status. You're going to be around the same range. It's, whether you use the percentage of 0.25 to 0.5% of total body mass, so total body weight per week, or you use just plain old 0.5 to 2 pounds per month, you end up being at the same place. It almost always calculates to be the same thing or the same range, so long as you are in a position that you should be approaching a muscle growth phase. Now, if you are advanced, you're obviously going to be on the lower end. And if you're new to lifting, you're going to be on the higher end. So in the example of 0.5 pound to 2 pounds per month, if you are advanced, you probably shouldn't expect to gain much more than 0.5 pound of muscle, pure muscle, not weight, but pure muscle per month. And if you're new, you can expect and hope for a full 2 pounds of muscle per month. So the newer you are, the more your body's going to respond to things, obviously, and adapt quicker. Knowing these rates of gain, does it ever really make sense to try and bulk any faster? Because we know a lot of people that say we just got to, again, eat as much as possible and train. You can cut later. And I would say the answer is usually no, because if we just eat aimlessly while trying to gain muscle, we are going to put on body fat, and body fat gain at a really fast rate, especially, but just in general, is not going to be healthy. Adding layers of adipose tissue, body fat, is going to be detrimental to health. So why risk that if we don't have to? However, there are a couple circumstances where it might be acceptable or okay to add a little bit of fat and just push the gains faster because you need to get the weight up. And the first one would be sports specific. If you are an athlete who literally needs weight on their frame because you're being pushed over on the basketball court or you're getting rocked over on the football field too easily and you just need to be able to stand your ground, as long as it's not dropping your performance on the court or the field, you might need to just gain weight, not necessarily muscle, but just weight in general so that you can plant and hold your ground against whoever is trying to tackle you or push you off the ball. The second situation would be you're very advanced. So if you're an extremely advanced lifter, you can probably push the gains a little bit faster by going into a bulk. And if you're a bodybuilder with in-season, off-season, it might make sense. And it might even be enjoyable because then you can have more flexibility and freedom in your diet. The other scenario would be if you're just really impatient, which is more of an excuse, but if you're really impatient and you don't want to be going at this snail pace because you're trying to track your weight week to week, maybe you go a little bit faster. And the other one, which is just pure laziness, is that you struggle to track anything but your weight. Using just the scale as your metric to show that you're gaining is probably not a good idea, but some people result to that because they're not trying to track anything else. They're not looking at measurements around their girth areas, so their arms, their legs, their stomach, their chest. They're not tracking their progressive overload in the gym enough. They're not taking progress photos. All of these things can tell us a lot more about the story of our progress than just the weight on the scale. But if you're one of those people that is lazy and just wants to track the scale, of course, you can move faster to make sure that you're seeing the gains on the scale on a weekly basis. So what does research actually say about lean gaining? The reality is there's not a ton of research on this, so we have to take this with a grain of salt. But there was a really cool study that they performed on lean gaining specifically, trying to see how many calories you need to go over your maintenance, so how big of a surplus, or if you need a surplus in order to actually build muscle. And they were trying to find out if you can lean gain, or do you really need an aggressive calorie surplus? And what the researchers found was that the study on lean gaining says you need a surplus if you are an already trained individual to optimize the gaining progress, which we know, but you do not need an aggressive or an extensive surplus to see muscle growth. And so this is a really good sign because this tells us that we can lean gain without adding a ton of fat or needing to push our calories into a really high territory. And so this specific study was done on resistance-trained individuals. They had both males and females, but it was almost all males. It was 19 males and 2 females. And they were randomized into 3 different diet groups, and they were taken through an 8-week study. So what they did with these groups is they had a maintenance energy intake group, which was 0% surplus. They had a moderate energy surplus group, which was a 5% surplus. And then they had a large energy surplus, which was 15% surplus, meaning they took their maintenance calories and added an extra 15% or an extra 5%, or they didn't do anything. They just left them at maintenance. What they found was that the maintenance group still built muscle, but by far the least out of the 3 groups, and it just wasn't at an appreciable rate. So that tells us right now that if we're trying to spend time building muscle, we probably need a surplus. We don't want to try to gain or gain-tain. And the only situation I ever recommend anybody try to build muscle while at maintenance is a newbie. And everybody should be training to build muscle, but only a brand new lifter who has never really spent time in the gym training week after week for months on end, that is the only person that needs to even hope for gains at maintenance calories. And they could probably even gain at a deficit of calories, but this is a short-lived process because newbie gains only last so long. Now, the interesting thing about this study is that the small surplus, 5%, and the large surplus group, 15%, gained the same amount of mass. So they gained the same amount of muscle and weight in the study. And this showed that it's not really about the size of the surplus, but rather that a surplus is present, that these people are in a surplus and they're training hard. And this may not apply to everyone because there's going to be circumstances where you do need more than 5%, and I'm going to get to that here soon. But overall, this is going to reign true, right? We don't need a massive surplus to build muscle. We just need a surplus, and we need hard training. And so this study proved that lean gaining can be possible. And so now we have to figure out, what do we do? How do you use this to actually apply? And there's really 3 steps to take in order to follow a successful and really well thought out gaining approach without gaining any body fat. The first thing you need to understand when going into a lean gaining phase and trying to really see a good amount of muscle is that it's mainly about training. This is mainly about a lean bulking diet, but Muscle is built from training in the gym. What you eat in your diet is primarily going to support your energy to go build the muscle in the gym, and it's also going to help you recover from the stress and the adaptations you created in the gym. But no matter what, you can't just eat more chicken and rice and gain muscle. You need to go to the gym and stress the body so that it adapts in a favorable way. And what this is really going to look like is following a high volume training program. So more sets per muscle group per week, with exercises that are going to maximize muscular tension. So the amount of tension placed on the muscle, the stimulus on the muscle. You have to pick exercises that work for you to be able to apply that direct stress. And then you got to do a good amount of volume with that. And then over time, you just got to make sure that you're progressively overloading these exercises week to week, month to month. And that could be by adding a set here or there, adding some reps here or there, or adding load. All of those are going to increase muscular tension directly, so mechanical tension placed on the muscle, or volume, which is the total amount of mechanical tension that you are creating week to week. And we have a really good breakdown of this. So if you check out the video that we did, it's 5 ways to maximize muscle for hypertrophy. It'll teach you exactly what you need to do. It's going to give you the 5 best tips that you can apply in your training directly to immediately start creating more mechanical tension in the gym and accomplishing more volume without necessarily spending hours and hours more in the gym. And we'll link that in the description of this video. The second step is determining your calorie intake. So to start this process, we're going to find maintenance. We can't do a lean gaining approach or even a calorie deficit for fat loss if we don't know where our maintenance is at. So you got to find your maintenance. You can use an online calculator, which we do have at TailoredCoachingMethod.com. We'll link that in the description of this video as well. Or you can just track your diet for 5 to 10 days and weigh yourself for 5 to 10 days. Then take the average caloric intake and your average body weight. If you're maintaining that on average throughout the week, then you can just assume that your calorie intake average is your maintenance. If your weight was fluctuating too much, spend another 5 to 10 days and then take the 2 averages, basically 2 full weeks of tracking both, and then find your maintenance from that. Once we have our maintenance calorie intake, we kind of have to create some baselines. We got to establish some baselines for our step count. We're going to establish baseline for our training program that we're going to follow and our macros within our calorie intake. And the reason we're going to find a baseline for our training plan and our steps is because if you enter a surplus of calories, that can alter your step count and your training program based on the energy levels you have. Some people adapt more rapidly or more abruptly than others. And you're going to want to pay attention to that so that you can make the right adjustments. And I'm going to explain why your metabolism might be one way or another soon. But regardless, you need to have your baseline step count and your baseline training program, as well as your macros before jumping into it. And for those macros, I'm going to recommend that you follow around 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. When you're in a gaining phase, you don't need extra protein. So really, you just need to be around 1 gram per pound. But depending on how far you push your calories up, as your carbs and fats start to increase because your total calories increase, your trace proteins are going to increase. And you're going to get more protein from rice and potatoes and peanut butter and broccoli and these different foods. We want to make sure we're getting a lot of high quality bioavailable protein. So protein that is going to be rich in the right amino acid structure to promote muscle growth. Now, all protein is going to be beneficial, but there are certain proteins, and primarily whey and animal products, those are going to contribute to muscle growth more than these trace proteins. So if you subtract all the carbs in your diet, you wouldn't even be getting your body weight in protein at this place. And that's why I recommend at least 1 gram per pound, if not going up towards 1.2 grams per pound of body weight when following a lean gaining approach. As for fats and carbohydrates, this is pretty simple. You're going to follow about 0.3 to 0.4 grams per pound of your body weight in fats. If you're an individual that is really light and you really need to gain a lot of weight, number one, you're probably not watching this video because you don't care about staying lean while you do it, but you might want to go over 0.4 grams per pound in fat because you just need more calories. But for most of us, we want to stay lean. We need to make sure we're getting extra protein because, again, protein has been shown in research to actually support body recomposition, which is losing fat and building muscle, more when we have above our body weight in protein. And with fats, we want to keep those somewhat low because our body needs more carbs to fill our muscle glycogen up, train really hard, and recover adequately. So that means we're going to have this amount of protein and this amount of fat, and whatever calories are left, we're going to give those to carbs. And that's going to be the majority of our diet. From here, we are going to increase our calories by either 5 or 10% to start. So if you are driving your calories up in a lean gaining approach, you are going to do so via carbohydrates, where we've already set our protein and fat, and we just gave the rest of our calories to carbs After staying at maintenance to just establish that baseline, we're going to start increasing our calories, and we're going to do so by adding carbs to the diet. But we want to add a total of 5% or 10% of calories via those carbs. Now, what research shows in this adaptive thermogenesis process, which is really just metabolic adaptation, right? It's our body's metabolism adapting to what we do with it. There's two types of metabolisms that we're going to discuss real quick, and that's the thrifty metabolism or the spendthrift metabolism. So you likely have a thrifty metabolism, which refers to a body that tends to conserve energy by significantly slowing down its calorie burning rate when food is scarce, making it potentially easier to gain weight. I would also suggest being mindful of your steps and your overall activity, because if you're making sure that you're generally staying active during this lean gaining phase, it's going to make sure that you don't add excess fat. We just want your activity high, because generally speaking, with people who have a thrifty metabolism, if you increase your calories, you don't necessarily start walking more and stepping more and moving more, because your metabolism doesn't adapt quickly or in a favorable way when we're trying to lean gain. You actually gain weight easily. So we want to make sure while we're increasing calories, we're still getting a lot of steps and we're still training hard so that those extra calories are going to work. Now, I would recommend going with 10% of an increase in calories if you have a spendthrift metabolism. And this is somebody who doesn't easily put on weight, and if anything, actually tends to struggle to put on muscle. However, you're probably not watching this, once again, if you struggle to put on weight, because if you struggle to put on weight, you're not worried about staying lean. You just want to gain. But in the case that somebody is watching this that doesn't gain weight easily and has a spendthrift metabolism, this is a metabolism which burns calories more readily, even when food is limited, leading to greater weight loss during calorie restriction and potentially a harder time gaining weight, because you just have a highly adaptive metabolism, which means it responds to the intake. You increase your calories and your body's burning more because it's moving more. You decrease them, it might actually respond to that as well. And you might actually lose greater weight loss, because it's not going to stop you from actually walking and stepping, because you're already doing so quite often. And the diet itself, the calorie intake itself, doesn't change that as much as somebody with a thrifty metabolism. But either way, the easiest way to look at step 2, which is increasing your calories either 5 or 10%, is to increase your calories 5% if you are either A, worried about gaining weight too fast and adding body fat. Maybe you're a little bit more insecure or self-conscious about this process. Or B, you just know that you gain weight easily. So let's just take a conservative approach and just barely inch up our calories by increasing them 5%. It is the lowest amount of calories that will still allow muscle growth, I would say. And if you are somebody on the opposite side where you know that you don't gain weight easily and you're ready to see the gains faster and you're not worried about it, bump it up to 10%, because why not? Let's push the gains and gain weight a little bit faster, because you likely have no problem with doing so. And the third thing we need to focus on here is how to periodize this over the long haul. Now, because this is not a fast bulking diet, you're not going to periodize this with harsh bulks and cuts going, 3 to 6 months of each, where you're cutting really hard and then bulking really hard and cutting really hard and kind of yo-yoing back and forth, which does have its place, right? There are times where people can, really push a bulk for 6 to 8 months and then really push a cut for 3 to 8 months. And that's totally fine. But anybody who's watching this or wanting to approach a lean gaining approach, we're going to periodize this over the course of 6 to 12 months. We're going to take a longer period of time, and we're just going to focus on staying in that calorie surplus, that small calorie surplus, for 6 to 12 full months. And when your weight stops going up, when you stop gaining weight slowly based on the rates that I described earlier in this video, then you are going to adjust your calories up by 5% again. So let's say you start with 10%, and for 6 months straight, you are slowly but surely gaining. It's nice, steady, slow. You're putting on muscle. You're not gaining too much fat, but you stall out and 3 weeks in a row go by. It is probably time to adjust your calories upwards. 2 weeks would be the bare minimum. If you just stop gaining for a week, you need to wait. Give it at least 2 weeks of no progress whatsoever on the scale or in the mirror or with measurements, then start increasing your calories. But if you want to be conservative, wait 3 to 4 weeks before you actually adjust your calories and just bump them up by 5% again via carbs. And you're going to do this for at least 6, but upwards of 12 months. Usually around at the 12-month mark, you're going to be anywhere between 6 and 24 pounds heavier, because if you consistently gained muscle throughout the entire 6 to 12 months at the 0.5 to 2 pounds per month mark, you're going to be anywhere between 6 to 24 pounds in this total 12-month period of time, which is fantastic. And at that point, you can either decide, do I continue pushing it because my health is great, I'm loving the gaining process and I want to build more muscle, or did I put on a little fat and it's time to cut? And if it is, then you can just start a calorie deficit and dive into a fat loss phase to essentially shred off or trim down some of the body fat accumulated, whether this is a mini cut that lasts, 8 to 12 weeks, or you spend 3 to 6 months dieting slow and steady to just slowly shave off the fat while maintaining the muscle. But the real point here is that you shouldn't be at a place where you've gained a lot of body fat because you've done this in a way that is lean gaining. And if you do this right and you adjust your calories as I've described throughout this video, then you may not even need a fat loss phase unless your goal is getting on stage, doing a photo shoot, or just getting shredded just for the hell of it. Because most people doing this approach will get to that place bigger, stronger, and just as lean as when they started. And to wrap this video up, a shameless plug. If this overwhelms you, confuses you, or you think it all sounds great, you just don't know what the hell to do with your diet now, go over to TailoredCoachingMethod.com, hit the yellow button, jump on a free coaching call, and we can show you exactly how this is what we do, and we can do it for you to get the best results possible. And if you're somebody who has the diet on lock, you feel really good about that, but you don't know what to do in the gym, head over to thetailoredtrainer.com and you can start a 7-day free trial of my training app that is filled with all of my training programs that are proven effective and backed by research. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, if you learned something today, give it a like, leave a comment below if you have any questions or comments for me, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for the next time we drop an educational video.